Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary and this NFL Mega Preview. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. It is NFL Free Agency Day today, and so that is what we are going to be focusing on with this show. So a few of the segments here today on this full episode are going to, or were taped a little bit before, so some of the things may be a little bit out of date on a couple of these, but if we're starting this off with the best fits per team. And then we are looking at, for free agents. So we're going through the top 15 free agents and seeing what team would be the best landing spot for them. And then looking at each team and looking at which free agent would be the best for them. And now some of those are done before some of the cuts happen and all of those sorts of things. So some of the salary cap numbers might be a little bit off. But if something is a little bit off, just use it as an explanation for what should have happened and why I think that should have been the case. And then we're going to get into some new stuff, original stuff for this one today, looking at some of the new free agents. So some of the cuts, Bosa, Adams, Lockett, plus the Raiders trade with the Seattle Seahawks. Going to be getting into that. And then looking at some of the potentially over and undervalued free agents on this. So it's going to be a busy one. As always, we are presented by Sea of Dead. Check out seaofdead403.ca for that great Calgary swag. And as always, we are fueled by Swift Energy. Check out swiftenergy.gg and use the code PKPrimetime for that 25% off. So let's dive right in on this mega preview and start with the best fits for some of the top free agents in this year's free agent class in the NFL. NFL free agency is almost upon us, and a lot of teams have a lot of money and a lot of needs. And so we're going to help them today as we find the best fit for each NFL team in free agency. I did this by salary cap space, and I did this by salary cap space based on Spotrac, which I think is the best for NFL salary information. But some of these might be a little bit off, but either way, I still like this is basically ranked in order of salary cap space. So if I'm off on a couple of teams, apologies, but that's just going off the information that I had. We also did have a bit of a move today as well, as Schefter tweeted out a bit ago, or am I just losing my mind? The Philadelphia Eagles are reportedly parting ways with six-time Pro Bowl corner Darius Slay. So Philadelphia getting a little bit more salary cap space, but that one, I didn't factor that one in too much for them because I had a pretty straight line on where I thought they should go. But anyway, here are now the, I think, best fits for each team in NFL free agency based on who could be available, salary cap space, and obviously roster needs. And so I basically did this like a draft where the teams that had the most salary cap space got first dibs, essentially. And so for the New England Patriots, who have the most salary cap space of anybody in the NFL, I went with Ronnie Stanley. They have a very big need on the offensive line. They probably have a couple very big needs on the offensive line. And they have the most salary cap space to fill it. And Ronnie Stanley might be the best just available player in free agency, coming off of a very good season with the Baltimore Ravens. The Vegas Raiders are up next. And I think a lot of people would go quarterback here with the Raiders. While acknowledging a need, I think that they might try to go a bit more of the value route on that one, so to speak. And so I think while this should be a position of value, I think they're going to try to go out and get one of the big names at it. And so I have for the Raiders with, I have them going Aaron Jones. We did this in the best fits for each free agent, and there's a couple that kind of cross over here, but I just think this makes so much sense. You have Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. Pete Carroll has always had a bruising running back, and now mostly it was Marshawn Lynch. But he has always had a good running back on his teams, even going back to his SC days where you had White and Reggie Bush back there, right? Like he has always had, I don't want to say a run first, but he has always really liked having good running backs. Chip Kelly, his offense was frustratingly run first out in Ohio State, given the talent they had at wide receiver, and now they end up winning championship out of it. But still, he was a run first type of a guy. And so this team has no talent at running back. I don't think they are planning on going into this year with the running backs that they had last year, kind of carrying the like. I don't think Alexander Madison is going to be the one who's, yeah, nope, that's our guy. And so I think they go out and get best available and load up with Aaron Jones, and then probably even draft another running back, either day 2 or day 3 in a pretty good running back class. Washington, talked about them with the Deebo Samuel trade earlier in the podcast. I have said before that I think that they need offensive line help, and they obviously need offensive line help. But I think that the offensive line free agency this year is lacking a little bit. And Washington still has a few holes on their team. And this is a very good year in the draft for offensive line depth. So I think they maybe take a shot with that and instead try to fill what also is a need, and that is on the defensive line. And so Milton Williams, defensive tackle who just won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles, I have him going to Washington. This offense obviously stepped up in a big time way, but the defense was a downside. And so adding a champion like this from the Eagles, some institutional knowledge of the NFC East, and give Dan Quinn some actual talent to play around with, I think is a very good fit. And so you hope that the draft, you can kind of fill in some of the holes there and now use some of the salary cap space that you have to go out and solidify the defense and just kind of round out your team a little bit more. Chicago, they need offensive line help at all costs. That defense is actually good, and they have a few weapons and they have a quarterback that you believe in. So they are going to be the ones who are really going to try to load up here in free agency on the offensive line. And so it's weird to say, well, they don't have as many holes as the team that went to the conference championship, but I think that was just a phenomenal coaching job that helped get them there. And Jaden Daniels was special, but for Chicago, it was so obvious that the offensive line was a problem right away, and it was all season long. So I think they go out and add a big name and go get Cam Robinson on at the offensive tackle. And honestly, I could see them double or triple dipping in the draft as well. Moving to the Arizona Cardinals, I have them going with Josh Sweat. Offensively, I think they have enough pieces that they can kind of figure it out. The defense, they just need talent, and they just need players. And one thing that can kind of mask a few talent deficiencies is if you have a guy who can get after the quarterback. And we saw Sweat just bull rush a tackle into Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. This is a very good, aggressive pass rusher. And so if he stays out on the market, I think that this is a guy who would fit with Arizona very well. Moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers, I have them going with Amari Cooper. He struggled with the Buffalo Bills, but I do think that Amari with Ladd McConkey is a nice 1-2 punch. They are, I think, maybe a little bit more vulnerable on defense than I initially thought, but they coached up a heck of a defense last year. And so I think that they are going to maybe focus a little bit more on the offensive side of the football here this season. This one might get a few people riled up, but I have Sam Darnold going to Minnesota. I think Minnesota is close, and I think it would be a real gamble to roll with JJ McCarthy and you know what, we're good. Given that he had a lot of question marks coming into last season and then gets banged up, I just think you saw that it works with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold finally was in a place that was maximizing him and getting the most out of him. And now it fell apart down the stretch. And so maybe that helps you get a bit of a value play on this one for Minnesota, and you can maybe shave a couple bucks off of that. But this team is right there. And so you could make the argument that, okay, they're right there. Let's really bolster some other spots, hope that the rookie kid works out, maybe get a Jacoby Brissett or someone behind him. No, don't do Jacoby Brissett, but you know what I mean? Get veteran quarterback X behind him and just hope that JJ has it figured out, but really load up the talent around him. I could see that. I just think you saw that this worked. It had no right working as well as it did. But now with another year in the system and a little bit less unpredictability maybe than a JJ McCarthy, I think it makes sense for Minnesota to make this move. So I have them sticking with Sam Darnold. Speaking of teams that are sticking with their guys, I actually have a couple now. As T. Higgins, I have him sticking around with the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati. Eye contact here. Just pay the man. You have an elite offense. You have people excited to come to your football games. You have your franchise quarterback saying, pay that man. So, pay the man. They have other needs, 100% they do. But you have such a high-level offense. Just pay the guy. just pay the guy. And it's a good spot for him as well. Pittsburgh Steelers, I have them sticking with Justin Fields. I think they had a good start with him, but it was obvious that there was a little bit of room for growth. So let him keep growing and see if you can continue to maximize what you have in that guy. And so I think Justin Fields makes a whole lot of sense there. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans. They have the first overall pick in the draft. And so maybe there are a few things that they can add to, but I'm going on the defensive side. I'm going Asante Samuel Jr. He's only 25 years old, so it is adding some talent in free agency, but some youth as well on the defensive side. You're obviously tempted to go offensive line with the potential of bringing in a young quarterback, but they used their first round pick the last 2 years on offensive tackles. So I think you let those guys develop and try to really solidify things on the defensive side with Asante Samuel Jr. The Detroit Lions, I have them going with Khalil Mack, adding a little bit of pass rush depth that they needed after their depth was severely exposed with all the injuries that they had, but everything really fell off a cliff after Aiden Hutchinson's injury. And so Mack, he is not one that you build an entire defense around, but he is still someone that can get after the quarterback and put that pressure on while the other guy takes up like double teams and stuff like that. So I think he is a good complementary piece, but he is still good enough that if there is another injury, he can still go out and wreck a couple of games here and there. San Francisco, I have them going with DJ Reed. They need to get some help at defensive back, and he has some familiarity with the system there. So I think that one works for San Francisco. For the Giants, I have them going Chris Godwin. Again, they are desperate for basically talent, but I think they really showed how win now they are looking to be by being in the Matthew Stafford sweepstakes. And so I think you go out, Godwin is probably going to be at a bit of a value because of the injury that he is coming off of, and you're not asking him to be your number one. Just be a number two along with Malik Neighbors, and whatever young quarterback you bring in, now you have a couple of weapons that he can go to. The obvious concern is the offensive line. I think they probably add a few pieces in free agency and then draft heavy at that position in the second round, depending on where they go with that first round pick, whether they do end up getting a quarterback there, or if both quarterbacks have come off the board, if you get a Travis Hunter or something along those lines to add to that offense, or I guess Hunter adds to both sides. But again, the free agency class for offensive tackles specifically is severely lacking. And so I do think that them just adding some weapons and then going out and addressing that in the draft, like the draft and the free agency really balance themselves out. It is just a bit of a gamble going with the rookie offensive lineman there when New York does feel quite a bit of pressure to win right now. The Green Bay Packers, I have them going with Carlton Davis in their secondary. They just need so much help on defense. He is a solid man-to-man corner, and Green Bay played the third most man in the NFL this season. So he fits the style very, very well there. The LA Rams, I have them going with Dre Greenlaw. I think you have a very exciting young defensive core out in Los Angeles. And I think Greenlaw, as someone who has been close to the top of the mountaintop before, coming in and being the adult in the room and being kind of the tone setter for that group and just giving you another very talented piece on the defensive side is an interesting call. And so I think that the Rams taking from the San Francisco 49ers would be very intriguing for them, as they are a little bit closer than maybe a lot of people thought they were going into last year. The Denver Broncos, I have them going with Byron Murphy. The defense played well this year, but they did get beat up in that playoff game. Murphy, a solid, versatile corner that can help this team out. Jacksonville, Javon Holland, the safety, formerly of Miami, I believe. They allowed a lot of explosive plays, Jacksonville did, a season ago, and he could help on the back end there. The Indianapolis Colts, we are now getting into a few of the teams that didn't have as much of the high-level salary cap space, and so this is where I think a few more of the offensive linemen now start to come back in, as their value kind of matches a little bit more with what the teams in the middle to back part of the cap space availability had. So I have Tevin Jenkins being the one going to the Indianapolis Colts. He is still a good young guard that can help out on the interior of this offensive line that just had some struggles. And when you have Anthony Richardson, who'll be looking to run, Jonathan Taylor, a very good running back, you need some help inside, and he provides that in, I think, a really strong way. Also, the ever-exciting guard pick, we do that with Carolina as well, as they go Kevin Zeitler in this. You have a smaller quarterback, so obviously, like the blindside thing, Sandra Bullock taught us how important that is, but you also, with a smaller quarterback, you need that help on the interior so that you don't have guys just pushing into his face and changing some of the throwing angles a little bit. Getting a solid guard like Kevin Zeitler, I think helps them out in that way. Next, we get to the defending Super Bowl champions, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think they just stay with what works. It's not a position they spend a whole lot on, but I think them and Zach Bond is the perfect marriage. It's kind of like Sam Darnold with Minnesota before. I think Bond, this was obviously best case scenario season for him. It was a team that kind of maximized him and got the most out of him. And for them, like this was someone that you kind of plucked out of nowhere. And so if you have to pay him a little bit extra, he was such a valuable part of your defense. How can you let that go? So I think that it's a perfect marriage that those two have to come together on. For the New York Jets, I have DeMarcus Lawrence coming off of an injury. So it's a good addition to the Jets pass rush that needs some help. And they are limited in the cap space area. So I think that could be a move that maybe helps them out. Baltimore, I have them going Stephon Gilmore. Vet cornerback can help out in a secondary that had some major struggles a season ago. Miami, I have them going Chase Young. Again, he is looking for a few more shorter term contracts, and maybe because of that, the dollar figure might price him out of Miami's limited salary cap range. But I do wonder if he wants to go to a bit more of a competitive atmosphere. Miami, almost by default, is going to be the second best team in that division. They already have the offense set. If they can get that defense back to where they were at the first part of I guess now 2 seasons ago, before Bradley Chubb and all them got hurt, this could still be a good football team. And so Chase Young, I think, kind of helps them out there. Tampa Bay, also going with an edge rusher in Dante Fowler. They need to be able to get some big stops that really did hurt them, down the stretch. And in that playoff game against Daniels, who was just able to sit there and do anything that he wanted. They were never able to get pressure off the edge. And so Dante Fowler, he doesn't fix everything, but they don't really have the cap space to find that fix everything type of a guy. And I think Fowler can be a bit of a veteran coming in at a bit of a value that can help them out in free agency. Moving on to the Houston Texans. I have them going receiver here. And this isn't a great wide receiver class, but I have them going Keenan Allen. And now, a guy who has been banged up a lot, to fill in for a team that has receivers who've been banged up a lot, feels like you are just asking for injury problems. But I think he is a solid vet, can be a reliable number 2, while Tank Dell is recovering from a horrific injury. And if Dell can come back this year, then he is a very, very good number 3 to go along with Nico Collins, who has really established himself as a legit true number 1 in the National Football League. And so, again, this is probably going to be a bit of a value play with Houston being pretty well tied up in salary cap space. For the Dallas Cowboys, I have them going with Jedrick Wills, the offensive tackle. Could be a good value for a team that needs help on the offensive line. Atlanta, I have them going with Mike Jackson. He held up with being kind of the main guy out in Carolina, but he was on a defense that struggled. And so maybe that brings his value down to a point where the Falcons can bring him in. They need so much help in that secondary. And so this can't be the only move that they make, but it can be a really, really solid move, I think, for them to kind of help out a little bit on in that secondary. Seattle. The obvious need is offensive line. But again, they are in negative salary cap space right now. And there's just, you're not, if you're bringing in an offensive lineman for basically a league min contract, then you're just adding to the problem anyway. So draft that position like 8 times in the draft and go out and address some of these needs. Now, maybe they free up a little bit of salary cap space by the time you're watching this or listening to this with a Tyler Lockett move or something along those lines. But for the time being, they don't really have a whole lot of cap space. And so I have them going on the defensive side with Sebastian Joseph Day. Again, they don't have the cap space to fill the needs they have on the offensive line. So you add a versatile player on the defensive line to help build out a little bit of that depth that you can you take care of some of the depth with one player at a couple of positions. I think that is probably the way to go for a team that is looking for value right now. The Buffalo Bills are all loaded up on salary cap right now. So again, not a ton of space to work with. I have them going out and getting Chauncey Golston. Had a strong year with the Cowboys, so there could be something there. A lot of the higher ticket defensive end options, I think, might take some of the obvious needs. And so I think Golston, it might have his value brought down a little bit, and that's where it could kind of pair up with what the Buffalo Bills are looking to do. 3 more here. We have Justin Reed, the safety, sticking around with the Kansas City Chiefs. He is such a huge part of what they do on that defense. I think they find a way to bring him back. The Cleveland Browns. I have them going with guard Aaron Banks, a potential value play to the interior of the offensive line, again, because of the Deshaun Watson situation. Maybe they get a ton of cap space, or maybe they get none. But right now they are sitting with exactly none. So there is... you have to look for values, and I think they do on the offensive line. And lastly, the New Orleans Saints. Marcus Davenport, defensive end. They have minus $47 million in salary cap space, which means you have to take a shot on a guy who has played like 3 games, or barely played at all in the last few years. So some risk built in, but maybe a bit of a reward for a team that is just looking for some talent right now. So all 32 teams with one fit for free agency. Going to continue to look at NFL free agency throughout the week as we head towards the big day next week. The National Football League offseason is ramping up as free agency officially is a week away, and teams are already starting to shuffle around some pieces to see where they might be able to find some value. And the Washington Commanders, I think, found a fair amount of it as they acquired Deebo Samuel from the San Francisco 49ers for a 5th-round pick. I really like this for Washington. A couple years ago, I thought Deebo was the best receiver in the league, with just how tough he was to bring down, how versatile he was. I think that he is an incredibly talented guy. Now, I don't think he's best receiver in the league anymore, but I do think that there is still a lot of talent there, and it has been tough to keep him on the field. And I think that part of that is because of he just doesn't go down, and he is tough to bring down, and he is versatile, so he's used a lot, so he's taking a lot of contact and all of those things, but there's still a very talented player in there. And so I don't know if he is a number 1. I don't know if McLaurin is a number 1, but they're both like at worst 1Bs. And so I think you have a very high level now 1-2 punch that you can work with as an offense here with Jaden Daniels. And again, it's a really fun offense or a really fun weapon, for this offense to kind of play around with and see. Like, they were a little bit creative offensively this year. Daniels kind of allows for that. But now with Deebo, you just add another very talented piece that can help this team get to another level. So now you have, we'll see what happens with the running backs this year, but Robinson and Eckler are strong, solid running backs. With McLaurin and with Deebo Samuel, that's a very good kind of offensive foundation that you have built. And so we'll get to the free agency preview here in a little bit. I'll let you know I didn't go offensive line for these guys because I think there could still be some of that in the draft they can maybe go out and acquire. And this isn't a fantastic offensive line free agent class either. But if they can solidify that free agent or that offensive line, then you really have something out in Washington as kind of a... Not going to love this because they're in the division, but kind of a poor man's Eagles, where like McLaurin and Deebo are your Brown and Smith. And Robinson and Eckler don't really get you very close to Saquon Barkley, but you are still building up a very fun offense out there, but a lot of that does depend now on the trenches. For San Francisco, this is the type of move that you have to make when the bill starts to come due a little bit. You have a young quarterback who you've been able to really build around for the last little while, but now that is going to be a very big ticket in the next little while, or you're going to be getting rid of him and you're going to be looking in a new direction anyway. So it's a cap casualty. It frees up some space. Deebo wasn't much of a factor there last year. They have a ton of weapons that they really like out in San Francisco, and so losing your 3rd or 4th best one isn't going to crush you all that much. So it is not a big return. But it does free up a little bit of cap space and does help with whatever Brock Purdy's next contract is going to be, or whatever their salary cap sheet is going to look like when they have whoever at the quarterback spot. So not a great move for the Niners, but certainly a necessary move for the San Francisco 49ers. Toxic in the chat. If you're the Commanders, you have to take advantage of this with Jaden Daniels still on his rookie contract. 100%. Yeah, like you have... San Francisco took advantage of Brock Purdy on a rookie contract. Now, he has turned into a better quarterback than we thought, but Jaden Daniels has a much higher ceiling, we believe, than Brock Purdy does. And so if San Francisco can take advantage of that, you absolutely have to. And so, yeah, maybe this does speed up the timeline a little bit because you just made it to the NFC Conference Championship game after years of irrelevance for that football club. And so, yeah, you have to take advantage of this while Jaden Daniels is still on that rookie contract. And they have, they have salary cap space to play around with, for sure. But they do need to, they because it's not a great free agency class offensive line, you still, maybe you go out and just overpay on a couple of guys on the O-line for a couple of years and just make sure that's solid and try to draft and kind of backfill around that. So Washington now, it's so interesting. And it does remind you, as you come up on the draft here, like they are in a completely different space now. There is a real confidence around this team that there just wasn't before. There is a real kind of established, like, this is our team that just wasn't there before. And it's one piece, and it's one quarterback changes the entire direction of the franchise. And so that is why you still have, even though we talked about this during the season, even though Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are like top 15 prospects, but not the top 2 best players in this draft, you still have teams considering taking them at 1 and 2, because if you hit that, it sets you up for years, and it can change the dynamic of your team in a heartbeat. Like Tennessee, we talked about it here before. Tennessee, I don't think is a bad football team. They were in quite a few games, but their quarterback cost them games. And Cleveland had a good roster, and they tried to take a home run swing with a guy who you definitely shouldn't have with, and it set them back years. And so the quarterback spot, it is a high variance thing because it can set you up for years and years and years, or it can set you back for years and years and years. And that's why it is not just getting a guy, but getting the right guy that is so important. So, now into some of the stuff that we're recording today here as we get ready for the start of NFL free agency. So again, a few of those in there, maybe some of the math or whatever not making sense, and some of the more available players now might have been better fits. So we're going to look at a couple of them now. The first one is Joey Bosa, released by the Los Angeles Chargers, freeing up quite a bit of salary cap space for the Chargers. This one seems a little too easy, but I do think San Francisco. I think that there is a need on the defensive side, because of some of the losses that they are about to accrue here, as we kind of talked about in the last couple of segments. I think there are a couple of players who are going to be moving on from San Francisco. And so I think Bosa being on the other side of Bosa is a pretty smart match for San Francisco, and I think there's obviously going to be some motivation for the player to pair up with his brother there as well. So I do think that is probably a very good landing spot for him and for that team as well. So that would be kind of my prediction, I guess, if we're going to be doing those on this one. But there are, we've talked about that there are quite a few teams looking for a pass rusher right now, and he moves to the top of the list in terms of talent for players that are available. Davante Adams gets released by the New York Jets, and I think there's going to be quite a high desire for the services of Davante Adams, and I get that it didn't end well out in New York, but he is still someone that is never really covered because of his ability to win contested catches, and he is not going to break away from a lot of guys now, but he is someone that I think has the ability to win a lot of contested catches still and be a very solid number 2 wide receiver on some pretty good teams. And so, look, he just left the Raiders. The Raiders are making some moves at the quarterback spot anyway with Geno Smith. Could there be a new thing there with a new group in charge out in Vegas? I would bet against that one. I think the one that actually makes the most sense is the LA Rams, if they are actually going to move on from Cooper Kupp. Adams wants to be out on the West Coast, and the Rams are going to need a bit of a solid number 2 receiver behind Puka Nacua and probably ahead of Tutu Atwell and some of those guys. So I think that the fit actually makes quite a bit of sense there. An underdog sleeper one would be New Orleans. They never have cap space, but if Davante Adams just wants to go out there, we'll see what happens with Olave, but either he is a fine number 1 for a team that's not really going anywhere, or if Olave comes back, that's a good 1, 2, 3 that you would have with Olave, with Adams, and with Shaheed, and with Derek Carr, his boy, out in New Orleans, getting to play a little bit more. It is on the wrong coast for him, and it is not what you would consider a competitive team, but it would be at least a little bit interesting and maybe getting to pair up with his friend more than he thought he would when he went out to the Raiders. Speaking of wide receivers, Tyler Lockett released. again, this seems easy, but I do wonder if he goes back now with Pete Carroll. And we'll talk in a second about how Pete Carroll is bringing in some Seattle ties with Geno Smith, but you wonder if that is an option there. The Raiders, they have Jacoby Myers, they have Brock Bowers, but having a Tyler Lockett who could help take the top off of a defense, I think would be very intriguing for what this offense could be and really open some things up there out in Vegas. That they have a ton of cap space, they definitely have a need, and so I do wonder if this is the type of a player that Vegas would want to bring in. And like number one pass catching option is going to be Bowers. Lockett and Myers, pretty good number two, number three to build out the Chip Kelly, Pete Carroll era, I guess, out in Vegas. So those are a couple of the other free agents that I am looking at. Used to do a show around here called Let's Raid, a weekly podcast on the Vegas Raiders. So do like focusing on the Raiders. That you can see it's blue right now for those watching, but it is a silver and black jersey. And so I do like to focus on the Raiders. So let's dive into that trade now as Vegas goes out and makes a big splash acquiring Geno Smith. Geno Smith is now a Raider as the Seattle Seahawks trade their quarterback to Vegas for a third-round pick. And quite frankly, I thought this was a surprising move. It was one that you heard talked about a little bit, but I did wonder if this was a little bit like the Giants. Oh, they're big on Matthew Stafford. And, oh, well, these guys, they're big on Sam Darnold, whatever. I wonder if this was just a lot of people drawing comparisons just because it was easy. But then you see the news come down from Adam Schefter, and this, I think it makes a ton of sense from a Vegas Raiders standpoint. Geno Smith on the last year of his contract, maybe he wants another one, maybe they want him up a little bit long term, but you do also want to see what he has. It has been a little bit up and down for Geno out in Seattle. Now, a lot of that is because they did not have an offensive line at all, which is, he's not going to a situation that changes all that much. The Vegas Raiders O-line is not phenomenal by any stretch of the imagination, but this is such a huge upgrade on the quarterback position for Vegas. And for a third-round pick, I think it makes all the sense in the world. And even if it is just a one-year contract now for Geno, it's a third-round pick. I think you do that 100 times out of 100, especially in the situation where the Raiders are, where they're drafting 6th. And I would be surprised, even though I think there are 6 better players than Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, I would be surprised if a quarterback of value is available at that spot at 6. So I think it is a good one-year stopgap that can be easily extended into a couple. And even if a Shedeur or a Cam falls to the Raiders at 6, you then draft them and they can redshirt behind a very good quarterback for a little bit and try to kind of iron out some of the wrinkles in their game and maybe elevate them a little bit more. So I just think it puts the Raiders in a really, really good spot, and all you're giving up is a third-round pick, which probably means I'm not that high on it from a Seattle standpoint, and I'm not. I think that this might be a mistake for the Seahawks, and I think it is a bit of a misunderstanding of where they are and why they were successful. And a lot is going to be changing out there. They released Lockett. DK Metcalf wants out. So not a great situation for a quarterback to be going into. And by the way, and I cannot stress this enough, the offensive line is dog shit. So bit of a problem there. Some of the talk is that they're going to be in on Sam Darnold now. I think that's a mistake. The one way that this makes sense from a Seattle standpoint is you move on from Geno. You take the cap savings you have there. You get generic quarterback X, and you just load up on that offensive line and try to get some other things around it. If you are going out and spending most of that money that you're saving on Geno on Sam Darnold, then you have potentially maybe even taken a step back at quarterback while not addressing any of the other needs that your team has. So there is more to come. We are very early in the offseason. I'm talking about this on March 8th. So maybe a couple of things have even changed by the time you're hearing this. But as we are sitting right now reacting to this trade, I don't think it makes a lick of sense from a Seattle standpoint. So those are some predictions and some analysis on some of the news that we have from the NFL. One more little bit of predicting to go, as values in the NFL can be all over the place. So let's take a look at who are some of the most over and potentially undervalued contracts in this year's NFL free agent market. Free agency is never really a time for efficient uses of money in the National Football League. And so we're going to look at 3 players that are probably going to take advantage of that, and 3 players that I think might be a little overvalued in this upcoming free agent market. And we begin with the obvious one, Sam Darnold at the top. And I have talked about, if you're watching the mega preview, I've talked about in this preview how Sam Darnold, I think, fits in with Minnesota, and it might be a mistake for Minnesota to let him go given how close they are right now. But I do also understand that this is a guy who fell apart in 8 days at the end of the season and has had exactly 1 good year now in the National Football League and is probably about to earn 40 some odd million dollars for that, which is insane to me. And so he is entering free agency at the right time for a number of different reasons. A, because that this quarterback class is not great. And one of the big names kind of already came off the board in Geno Smith going to the Vegas Raiders. The draft class isn't awesome. The free agent class, he is kind of it. So he is going in at a time where there are some quarterback needy teams, some really desperate GMs, and he is the belle of the ball right now. And also he is coming off of his best season. And so there isn't an offensive coordinator or quarterback coach in the league that isn't saying, no, I can get the most out of that guy. I can do that. The Seattle one is interesting. It was funny. They were talking about, well, his old quarterback coach is the quarterback coach out in Seattle. It's like, I don't think familiarity is what Sam Darnold needs right now, unless it was last year and his familiarity with what they were doing there, because that was the only time we got the most out of Sam Darnold. So I think that this is a great time for Darnold to be entering free agency, and I think that he is going to capitalize on it greatly. Another one, defensive tackle Milton Williams, coming off of a championship, so you get the proof of concept, like, oh, you can win with that guy, because it literally just happened. And a lot of teams are looking for some help along the defensive line, and I think that you see someone coming on with that defense, like, okay, need that dude because he's bringing that championship pedigree. And look, I think Milton Williams is a good player, but if we're going down the list of reasons Philadelphia's defense was so good and they won that championship, it takes me a little bit before I get to his name. And again, that's not a knock. That is more a statement on how talented that defense was rather than how bad Milton Williams is or anything like that. But I do still think that getting the championship pedigree, that championship boost to the contract and everything like that, I think this is going to be a bit of an overvaluation for Milton Williams. And the last one is Haason Reddick. I hated how he handled this last season. He still has quite a bit of name value and again is playing a position where there is a lot of need out there right now. So I think that there is going to be a team that wildly overpays because they feel like he could be that missing piece to that championship pass rush. Like, hey, we need this. Look what just happened out in Philadelphia. We need that guy to come in and really be that game breaker for us. And so I could see Haason Reddick really cashing in. And I don't know if I want that guy around my team at this point. So those are the players that I think could be overvalued in NFL free agency. What about the other way now? What about the undervalued players? Here's where I think that some good value can be found in NFL free agency. A lot of bad contracts get handed out in NFL free agency, but there are some deals to be had. So where are the on sale tickets for NFL free agency? Let's take a look at a few of them here. We begin with Dre Greenlaw. Missed most of 2024, so I think people are forgetting that this is one of the more talented defensive players in the National Football League. And so because of that, I think that there is going to be a bit of a misvaluation of this player. I think that this is a guy that you can put in the middle of your defense. He is an absolute leader. He is a game changer. I think that this is someone who makes a difference on the defensive side of the football. And if you can get him for a value, even for a year, the value that brings to your organization could be massive. So I think Dre Greenlaw is absolutely a potentially undervalued player in this year's free agent class. Calais Campbell is another one. Being 39, I think that there is going to be a little bit of scared away, kind of projecting that there could be a fall off for Calais Campbell. But I think this is still a guy who is a load as a complementary piece. If you are a team that needs defensive help and needs a lot of it, I don't know, like he is not the, okay, we've got him, so everything is set now. But if you are one piece away on the defensive side and you are kind of needing a bit of a value contract, I think Calais Campbell as your defensive tackle really can help things out if you have a strong pass rush over there on the outside. And I think at 39, there's going to be a bit of a value for him there. And then DeMarcus Lawrence at 33, he's coming off of an injury. I think you could get a really good defensive value or a real good value contract for him, given how many people you're seeing ranked above him on some of these free agent boards. And so I think that there is going to be, again, some of these defense needy teams that are a little cap strapped that are going to be able to really get a very good value in a DeMarcus Lawrence contract. So those are the players that I think are a little bit undervalued going into free agency here this week. That is going to do it for the Mega Preview. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. As always, we are presented by Sea of Dead. Check out seaofdead403.ca for that great Calgary swag. We are fueled by Swift Energy. Check out swiftenergy.gg and use the code PKPrimetime. If you're watching, make sure you give us a like. Make sure that a subscription on YouTube would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching today. You can also get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening in podcast form, subscribe, follow, whatever your podcast catcher lets you do that. A rating would be nice as well. We haven't had a few of those in the last little while, so getting a few of those would be awfully nice as well. Coming up tomorrow, it is going to be a full NHL trade deadline recap. Sorry, that's coming up on Wednesday. Coming up on Wednesday is a full NHL trade deadline recap. Didn't get to do a lot of the stuff on trade deadline day and all of those things, but now letting it breathe a little bit, we're going to break down all the moves that we saw into another bigger NHL trade reaction piece going up on all the channels tomorrow. So thank you guys so much for hanging out today, and I will talk to all of you on Wednesday. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.